Not going to synopsize the whole of the Bible, but it did make me think, there are some books that you could teach an awful lot, like Romans or something, by synopsizing like that, by teaching a little over here and a little over there. A deceiver could do that too, and that's not what I'm going to do. But anyway, let's go to Genesis chapter 43. I have no opening analogy. If you remember the story, it is the story of Joseph. Joseph was the second youngest son of Jacob. He was the favored son of Jacob because he was the son of Rachel, whom he loved. And he showed that love to him in ways that were so powerful and so contrasted with the lack of love that he showed his other sons that they grew to hate him. They betrayed him. They sold him into slavery in Egypt, told their father they found his coat of many colors covered with blood, and let him think that he'd been eaten by an animal. Meantime, he was sold to a man named Potiphar. Potiphar worked for the Pharaoh. God gave him favor in Egypt. He earned a high spot with Potiphar, but Potiphar's evil wife took an evil interest in him, and when he was not interested in her, she became angry and took vengeance by falsely accusing him of trying to rape her. He then went to prison. He spent some time, at least a couple of years in prison, but during that time, God also gave him favor with the jailer. And in all of this, he got training to do things that we now know God was going to do with him in Egypt. He also began to use his power to interpret dreams. And when he interpreted dreams in a prophetic way in the prison, eventually word got back to the Pharaoh. When he had dreams, he was sent to the Pharaoh, and he explained to him that there were 7 years of abundance coming and 7 years of famine coming. And if they would just store all the stuff from the abundance, they would make it through the famine. And I believe through the sovereignty of God, just like what we saw with Esther, God put it in Pharaoh's heart to make Joseph the man to do it. So he went from being a favored son to a hated son to a slave to a sex offender, not guilty, but a sex offender, to being the second most powerful man in the most powerful country in the world at the time. Only God could do that. And then when the famine came, and I did discover going through it today that at this point they're 2 years into the famine. There's like 5 years left. Jacob and his sons began to starve. They went into Egypt. They bowed before Joseph, not knowing who he was, to fulfill the prophecy that he had made many, many years before. And Joseph began to play kind of a cat and mouse with them, sending them back to their father, holding on to Simeon. And now they're coming back because, well, the famine continues. So let me say a quick prayer, and we'll start 43, verse 1. And again, I'm not going to go through every verse. We're going to try and see how far we can go without that. Lord, I thank you for your word, and I pray that as I try to synopsize this, that I will not leave out anything that you want me to preach on today, that you would guide me in this. I will follow my notes, Lord, but I know that by your Spirit you can overrule me, whether I like it or not, and I'm telling you I like it if you do. I pray you would give me an open mind. I pray you would give me a clear head and even an eloquent tongue, and that you would use me in ways beyond myself to plant things in the hearts and minds of everyone within the sound of my voice that would bear fruit even years from now, long after we've forgotten where we heard it. And I pray it in the mighty name of Jesus Christ our Lord, and all God's people said, Amen. 43:1. Now the famine was severe in the land. So it came about when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back, buy us a little food. And again, I've looked further on, and this is 2 years into the famine. Judah spoke to him, however, saying, the man solemnly warned us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. By that he means Benjamin, who is now Jacob's favorite son, his youngest son. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you will not see my face unless your brother is with you. Now skip down to verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best products of the land in your bag and carry them down to the man as a present. A little balm, and a little honey, aromatic gum, and myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. And maybe you're thinking, well, if they had food, why did they have to go for grain? Well, you can't survive on this stuff, unless you're John the Baptist in the wilderness. Plus, with grain, you need it for your animals. There are a lot of reasons to have to go get grain. They did have some things, and they are taking some of them as gifts now to Pharaoh. Verse 12, take double the money in your hand, because you remember that the money had been placed back in their sacks on their way back to Canaan. Take double the money in your hand. Take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, and arise, return to the man. And he's talking about Benjamin. And may God Almighty grant you compassion in the sight of the man, so that he will release to you your other brother, meaning Simeon and Benjamin. As for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. He's facing the famine and the reality that if he doesn't, at least on a practical level, if he doesn't send them to get food, they're all going to starve to death anyway. So he's got to risk his son, even though he doesn't want to. Verse 15, so the men took the present, and they took the double portion of the money in their hand, and Benjamin, and then arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with him, he said to his house steward, bring the men into the house and slay an animal and make ready for the men. We are to dine. They will dine with me at noon. Now, skip all the way down to 24. Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys fodder. So they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present. This was the stuff they had brought from Jacob, which was in their hand, and bowed to the ground before him. Notice how it keeps getting fulfilled over and over and over. This was the very dream that caused such offense that they sold him into slavery. 27. Then he asked them about their welfare and said, is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? And remember, he's asking that question like he doesn't know, but he knows exactly who he's asking about. He's asking about Jacob, his beloved father, who he has not seen in probably 20 years, at least. 28. They said, your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. They bowed down in homage. There it is again. As he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he said, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, may God be gracious to you, my son. 30, Joseph hurried out, for he was deeply stirred over his brother, and he sought a place to weep, and he entered his chamber, and he wept there. The emotions are starting to overcome him. He's held on to them for a long time. Every once in a while, he has to rush out of the room. It makes you wonder humanly why he doesn't just stop playing the game. But then in reality, I can remember so many times when I've played games in my life, I'm not Shirley MacLaine. I've had one life. There's only one life, and then comes the judgment. Hebrews 9:27 in my life, and I'm betting you do too. This was also something way beyond anything that I think any of us have ever suffered. So all of his emotions are wrapped up in this, but seeing Benjamin is just about to send him into conniptions. Verse 31, then he washed his face and came out, and he controlled himself and said, serve the meal. So they served him by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is loathsome to the Egyptians. They looked down on the Hebrews. The Hebrews were unclean. As I said before, they viewed body hair as unclean. And the Jews, in the same way that the Egyptians kept themselves as almost as bald as possible, Hebrews were pretty hairy people, and proud of it. So, verse 33, now there were seated before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth, meaning the difference between Reuben and Benjamin. And the men looked at one another in astonishment. He took portions to them from his own table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they feasted and drank freely with him. Now, I don't know what they saw in all of that, but we know why he did that. It's because he loved seeing Benjamin. This is the same sort of thing that, I've forgotten his name, but the husband of Hannah and Peninnah in 1 Samuel did for Hannah, whom he loved, right in front of Peninnah, whom he did not love. He always gave her extra portions when he served them a meal. Verse 1 of chapter 44. Then he commanded his house steward, saying, fill the men's sack with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. In other words, give their money back to him again. Put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph had told him. As soon as it was light, the men were sent away, they with their donkeys. They had just gone out of the city and were not far off when Joseph said to his house steward, up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one with which my Lord drinks? And he's talking about himself, Joseph, in which he indeed uses for divination. Now, Joseph didn't use it for divination, but Egyptians did. He's still doing the ruse of pretending to be somebody he is not, so they do not recognize who he actually is. You remember, he's even pretending to need an interpreter. If you remember when we looked at the last chapter, they were talking amongst themselves, and they didn't know he understood every word. You have done wrong in doing this. So he overtook them and spoke these words to them. They said to him, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks we have brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? With whomever your servants is found, let him die. We also will be my Lord's slaves. Now he said, let it also be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and the rest of you shall be innocent. In other words, I won't kill you, but I'll keep one of you as a slave. And of course, he knew he'd already put it in Benjamin's sack. Then they hurried. Each man lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. He searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes. When each man loaded his donkey, they returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what is this deed you have done? Do you not know such a man as I can indeed practice divination? And again, this is part of the ruse. This is not factual. So Judah said, what can we say to you, my Lord? What can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Behold, we are the Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup has been found. But he said, far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the cup has been found, he shall be my slave. But as for you, you go in peace to your father. Now go all the way down to verse 25. Our father said, and this is Judah speaking at this point, our father said, go back and buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down if our youngest brother is not with us. Then, if our brother is with us, then we will go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons, and the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm befalls him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol, and Sheol is the Hebrew word for the grave, in sorrow. Now therefore, when I come to your servant my father, and this lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in this lad's life, when he sees the lad is not with us, he will die. Thus your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant our father down to Sheol in sorrow. Now watch what Judah finishes with. For your servant became surety for the lad, in other words, a guarantee to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then let me bear the blame before my father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad, a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. In other words, he's saying, let me remain and take the punishment instead of him. Now remember, Judah was the worst of all of them. If you go back, and we're not going to go back, but if you go back, Judah was the one who had an affair with his own daughter-in-law. He was the one that suggested first that they sell him into slavery. He was the one that was actually the worst in all of this. And now he's the one who has been converted, at least in his heart, for the sake of his father, to even offer his own life for Benjamin's life. 34, for how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me? For fear that I seek the evil that would overtake my father. In other words, it would kill him. Verse 1 of chapter 45, then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, have everyone get out from before me. So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Can you imagine? You sell your brother into slavery 20 years earlier. You assume he's dead. When things are going bad, you talk amongst yourselves about the terrible thing you did, which they did in chapter 43. And now you're facing this Egyptian lord who doesn't look like your brother because he's shaved all his hair off. He's painted eyebrows on his face. He's 20 years older. He's probably 40 years wiser. You don't expect him to be alive at all. And now suddenly this man reveals himself as the very brother that you sold into slavery 20 years before. Go down to verse 5. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves, this is Joseph talking to them, because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. You remember what we talked about in Esther this morning? God's name was not mentioned in Esther, but you see him working all through Esther to preserve the life of the Jews against the evil plans of Haman. And Joseph recognizes that all of this has happened to him for a reason. He was not sold into slavery by happenstance. He was not falsely accused by happenstance. He did not wind up in prison by happenstance. It was all part of God's plan to save his people. And here again, it brings up the fact that Joseph is a picture of Christ. He is rejected by his own. He is handed over for silver to the Gentiles. He disappears as good as dead and suddenly rearises in glory to save his people. He is a picture of Christ. And now he is offering them forgiveness for everything that they have done. Verse 6, for the famine has been in the land these 2 years. That's a verse that tells us it's been 2 years. That means since those dreams, since he's been put in charge, it's been 9 years, because there were 7 years of abundance. And there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord of all his household, and the ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me the lord of all Egypt. Come down to me and do not delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen, not the one in Virginia. This was the original one in Egypt. And you shall be near me, and you and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have, there I will also provide for you, for there are still 5 years of famine to come. You and your household and all that you have would be impoverished. Go down to 14. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck, and that's a Hebrew expression. It sounds like violence to us, but it means they threw themselves into each other and just wept. I remember when my mother died, in my family we don't do a lot of that emotion, but my brother Tony and I did that at one point. And when I was weeping, it sounded like I was listening to somebody far away. I had no control over it. And to describe that as falling on each other's neck and weeping is a very good poetic description of exactly what happened to us. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and Benjamin wept on his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept on them, and afterwards his brothers talked with him. Now when the news was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, it pleased Pharaoh and his servants. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your beasts and go to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. Go down to verse 24, we're almost done. So he sent his brothers away, and as they departed, he said to them, do not quarrel on your journey. Now, the reason I find that interesting is because I'm a youngest son. There are personality traits to people born in certain areas of the family. I don't know if there's a whole science to it. This is not a youngest son's comment. It's not. I would never dare to look at my older brothers and sisters and say, do not quarrel on the way. I would probably do something goofy to embarrass them because I'm a youngest son, but I would never say that to them. But Joseph has switched places with his brothers. In his suffering, he has become deeper and wiser and more powerful than they. And no, I'm not talking about myself and my siblings. I'm talking about Joseph and his. And as he sends them away, he tells them not to quarrel, and he's talking to them like he's their older brother, if not their father. And this is out of place for a youngest son. And I would point out again that God often does this. He likes to turn things upside down because youngest sons are not uncommon among the great in the scriptures. Youngest sons happen over and over and over again. Jacob was the youngest, Isaac was the youngest son. Jacob was the youngest son. Joseph was the second youngest son. Moses was the youngest son. David was the youngest son. Solomon was the youngest son. This happened over and over, even as the eldest got the honor, because God likes to use the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. Let's finish up. Verse 25. They went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. They told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and indeed he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. But he was stunned. I mean, who can blame him? For he did not believe them. When they told him all the words of Joseph that he had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. I mean, think about that. It's as though during the whole of the 20 years, his spirit was not revived. For 20 years, he was the walking wounded. Mourning, you mentioned that, some mourning can go on and on and on. And we need to always be patient with those who are mourning. And I agree, Robin, it never passes. You fill it with other things. You fill it with other new people. When my mother died, there's still a sorrow in me over my mother, and she's been gone for 36 years. But I've since filled it with a wife and 3 daughters, and now a grandson. And this happens with you, too. You don't so much fill up the hole. I mean, you don't so much just forget about it. You just, God sends you other blessings. Anyway, verse 28. Then Israel said, it is enough. My son Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die. And that's where we'll quit tonight. You want to do another song, Dale? Because right after that, I'm going on vacation.
That's right. Let's take 5 or 6 songs.
You what?